Hi, I'm Tommy Linstroth. I am founder and CEO of Green Badger. Green Badger is a software platform to streamline and automate green construction compliance, whether that's an individual building certification or a broader topic such as ESG. I've been in the sustainable real estate business for over 20 years. I served as director of sustainability for a developer here based in the Southeast. So I really cut my teeth on sustainability practices from an owner's perspective with our own dollars at risk on how to design, build, manage, and operate real estate portfolio as sustainably as we can, as well as our operational practices. And then spent years helping hundreds of projects and organizations implement sustainability within their own practices and their own buildings before launching Green Badger here earlier in 2016. So a lot of experience managing ESG within my own organization and helping other organizations implement sustainability into their own business practices. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance, which is a set of metrics that can be used to evaluate a business. It's originally originated as a tool set used by investors to make good investment decisions, but is now rippled into all building sectors, or all sectors, including construction, development, and everything associated with it. At its core, though, ESG is really a business strategy that helps organizations analyze where they stand on environmental, social, and governance issues and creating a pathway to improving those issues in the future. It's really timely here. You're starting to see that, specifically in the design, construction, verticals, we're really in the end service providers. And so we are servicing our customers and our clients. And what we're seeing is that more and more customers are asking for this. If you're building, for large scale Fortune 100 companies, they are probably saying, hey, how much carbon was generated throughout the course of this construction, or what type of inclusion do you have as part of your design and construction process? We're also starting to see an increased regulatory requirement with things like the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the SEC filings, that if you're doing business with the federal government and it's a pretty low threshold, it's only about $7.5 million, you've got to start reporting and tracking some of these ESG measures. So it might not be a full-blown ESG report, but there's definitely components that are becoming much more prevalent, both from private sector demand as well as potentially regulatory requirements. So all the more reason that start thinking about it now. You don't want to wake up 18 months from now and somebody's demanding you have these programs and practices in place, and we're looking at them like, what are you talking about? So ESG is not new. It's getting relatively new in the design and construction market, but it's certainly becoming just another one of those growing pieces of compliance that customers are asking for and regulatory agencies are putting in place. One of the biggest challenges we see for the industry of implementing a successful ESG program is just that it is so broad and it can be very daunting. We see a lot of paralysis by analysis. And what I mean by that is that there's no set framework. Like in commercial construction, where you might have LEED certification, there's a checklist, there's a design set of points you can go after. With ESG, there's hundreds and hundreds of different data points, and some are relevant to your organization, some are not. And it can be, quite frankly, overwhelming. And if you look at it and you're coming in new to this and you're like, I'm trying to develop an ESG program, and you see all of these things out in front of you, it's a lot easier just to be like, you know what, I'm going to punt this down the road a little bit. So, by far the biggest challenge we see is, where do I start and how do I make this into a manageable bite-sized program? There's a lot of sense that if I'm not doing everything, I'm doing nothing. That if somebody says, hey, what's your ESG program, and you only highlight 5 or 10 things, they're saying, oh, that's not enough. But really, that's not the case. And everybody's in a different path on their sustainability and their ESG journey. But the most important thing is just taking step one. There's no right or wrong answer. It's not a one size fits all. It's going to look different for everybody. Residential builders program is going to look a lot different than a commercial builder. If you have one office versus if you're in all 50 states, all of those are different factors that are going to influence what your ESG program looks like. And again, the important thing is just get started and start with what you can control and build from there. The importance and value of ESG, I really can't overstate. At its core, as I mentioned earlier, ESG is really a business strategy. It is something that I strongly feel can help differentiate your organization, can help you win more business, and can help you attract and retain talent. If you look at any of, we're in one of the tightest labor markets ever. And when you look at people coming out of school, it's something like 70+% of them want to go to companies that align with their values. And this is something that they value. So for us, I always ask, what's the risk of not having an ESG program? Yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time and effort to start pulling this program together, but how many jobs are you willing to lose if you go into a bid meeting and they say, hey, tell us about your ESG program, and you don't have an answer, or you have a position that's vacant for 6 months because somebody left to go to a different organization that they felt had better alignment with their values. And for us, that risk highly outweighs, what any cost would be to come in. I'd much rather say, hey, maybe we never won any business of this, but we were prepared and we retained and kept our employees happy, than again losing one project, two projects. Where's that cutoff where all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is really financially impacting us for not having this type of program in place. We recently released our general contractor's guide to ESG implementation, which is really built to serve as a roadmap. Again, whether you're residential, whether you're commercial, whether you're 10 people or 10,000 people, of taking those first steps to get started implementing an ESG program at your organization. As I mentioned, the biggest challenge we see is that people just don't know where to start, and it can be totally overwhelming. And I certainly get that. When I first got introduced to the concept, it was mind-boggling to me, and I've been in the industry and living sustainability for a long time. So this roadmap, while not comprehensive, it's not meant to be 100% solution for everybody. What it's meant to be is a framework to say, look, I want to get started with ESG. What do I need? What type of team do I need to pull together internally? Where should I start? And most importantly, where should I grow into? Back to, we're not coming out advocating that you start with a 1,000-point plan of ESG. Start manageable and build from there. It is a business strategy. And just like any business strategy, you wouldn't enter a new product line or a new market if you didn't do your research on what your competitors are doing, if you didn't have an understanding of the cost to entering that market, if you didn't have an understanding of the size and opportunity. You wouldn't just say in 2 weeks, oh, hey, I expect to have this new product offering. And ESG is the same way. It's not just, we're going to have this overnight. It's going to be a multi-year business strategy that you're going to start on day one and eventually, evolve into. And then, construction firms are often about continuous improvement. And this is no different. We're just going to start with step one, and then we're going to work towards continuous improvement month after month, year after year, and continue to strengthen our program. So getting started, outside of allocating resources and putting your team together to really get started in ESG, we've got we proposed a 3-tier approach, and that is really focus again with step one. Step one, tier one, whatever we want to call it, is just what you can control. These are data points or practices that are 100% within your realm. If you're a contractor, it might be something like fuel cards, right? If you've got a commercial fleet, you've got fuel cards tracking fuel consumption. So it could be potentially pretty easy to get that annual fuel data, or office energy consumption, or office water consumption. Somebody's been paying those bills. That's a good starting point. It's you own it, you control it, you pay those bills. That's a good step one, and those types of utilities would be one of the environmental metrics that you look at. There's a dozen ways you could go with environmental, social, and government. Social could be, your workforce diversity and training opportunities and things of that nature that you can look retrospectively back at perhaps the past year of your, training efforts or your workforce makeup, and come back and set a baseline. That's the other part of step one and tier one is, right, we want to get the data that is easily within our grasp, but also that we can use to set a baseline. What we see is a lot of people jump to tactics. Tactics are the fun part. Tactics are, I want to put in EV chargers, or I want to put in a wellness program, right? But until you know where you're starting from, we would highly recommend you want to benchmark and then set your goals, and then you implement tactics to meet those goals. So we want to start with the tier one, which is the things we can control, that we've got a lot of information on, that we have internally, and then take the time to benchmark and really level set where we've been, so that we can then set those goals of where we're going, and then use those tactics to achieve those goals. After we do that, then we start to look at tier two, and that's continuous improvement, or things that are a little bit more stretch goals, right? So things that we can control, but maybe we weren't doing today. So, one that we like to look at is, okay, well, we did all of our office energy consumption, for a contractor. And now maybe we look at the job site and start looking at the energy that's consumed by our company on the job site. Or from a social issue, what is our minority and women makeup of our subcontractors, right? That's something that, sometimes we calculate on projects that require it, but that's something that you could choose to do on all of your projects. And again, set that benchmark goal of where you want to go from it. And then really tier 3 is what can you influence? So these are things that are not necessarily, you can't just slam a hammer down and make it go, but it's something you can inform or influence. And a lot of times in construction, this comes down to things like subcontractor activities, right? You can't tell the subs where to commute or how to commute. You can't. You could probably demand, what type of equipment they use if you read it in contract specs. But again, a lot of times this is more collaborative. So this is again starting to work within your sphere of influence and engaging subcontractors, engaging things on the supply chain, again, above and beyond what you can necessarily do internally. And that's sort of how we propose you grow into it. Again, you want to start easy, not necessarily easy, but start within the things you can control. Once you have a good bench line and you set your goals, you broaden that scope a little bit. And then finally you get into the things you can influence. Again, this is not something you do over a 1 month period. This is a multi-year implementation as any other business strategy would be, but it just gives you a logical framework and hopefully makes it bite size enough that it just gets some of the overwhelmingness sediment out of the air. There's plenty of real world examples that show the business benefit of ESG. There's definitely, as I mentioned, some of the soft cost benefits of employee engagement, transparency, having an open company culture, attracting and retaining talent. That's certainly important. But sometimes people can say, okay, well that's nice, but show me the actual dollars and cents. And really, to me, that comes from we're starting to just see the construction industry's customers demanding this. And it's, if you can't pass this sustainability survey, I was just at a conference this past week, and I talked to a number of contractors, and they're saying, look, we're getting supplier sustainability questionnaires and they're grading us. And if we don't have programs in place, we're just not even eligible to bid on this work. And they're not going to allow us to even the opportunity to win this job. So now we're talking about, again, losing market share, not measuring up to your peers. So again, what is the risk of not having an ESG program in place? Do you want to even lose the opportunity to even participate? And again, we're seeing it more and more. And it might not be a full-blown ESG, but it's, hey, what is your carbon footprint? Are you tracking scope 1 and scope 2 emissions? What does your supply chain look like? These are all questions that we see today getting asked in the construction industry, in both the residential and the commercial side. And if you don't have an answer to that question, and again, it doesn't have to be, hey, we've got solar panels in every building, and we're all driving EVs and doing all this craziness, but it's, hey, yeah, we've got a plan, we're tracking emissions, we're building out our ESG program. That's going to keep you in the game, right? And at this point, you need to be in the game to be able to continue to earn revenue. And we're just seeing those types of project requirements more and more. And you don't want to just make yourself ineligible from winning those jobs and winning that work by not having a plan in place. So we are definitely seeing it. We're seeing it more and more. And that's just on the private sector side. This is before we're even starting to see the regulatory agencies come in and codify these types of requirements. So again, strongly recommends that as a core business strategy, just like safety, right? What used to be that safety, you had to harp on people to wear vests and hard hats and safety glasses, and now you don't walk into a job site without everybody on there. There's a strong sentiment that ESG is going to be following that same path. And safety implementation didn't happen overnight. You now have safety directors and safety professionals within every general contractor around here. And I would advise that ESG is probably going to be going that same route. ESG, I would say, is generally applicable. It's, if you're working in the building enclosure space, this is going to be part of somebody's supply chains, part of somebody's design team. And when they start, asking those ESG surveys and questionnaires, you're part of that as well. And certainly, building using that as part of your business differentiation strategy and the other benefits that we see from ESG, it's not just the general contractor, it's the design professionals, it's the material providers, it's the manufacturers, it's subcontractors. As we all know, construction's an ecosystem, and we all play an important role. And ESG just doesn't end up being one organization's responsibility. It ends up being the responsibility and opportunity for everybody in here. And again, we don't think it has to cost a whole bunch of money. We think the risk of not having an ESG program highly outweighs any time investment you need to put into it. And at the end of the day, we think your employees are going to get behind it. They're going to get engaged, and overall, it's just going to be an overall benefit for the organization. There's not really a downside I can think of. You can find the ESG guide as well as a host of sustainability resources for the built environment at getgreenbadger.com, and just check out our resources tab. It's all completely free. Feel free to also follow Green Badger on all of the usual social media channels to stay up to date on all our latest webinars, product offerings, and resources that we put out.